For this video model, we're looking at an English 3 lesson on teaching students to do narrative responses to prepare for TN Ready. So this was the starting point of my lesson plan, and you can see this is just a screenshot from my weekly lesson plan. I went through the Bellringer Activity on evaluating the new learning and sort of came up with a change to my lesson plan because what I decided I wanted to do was to give them my ending and have them identify the elements in my example that would align with the narrative rubric. So once I went through and applied the evaluate, I already saw changes. The next step I did was exactly what you all did with going through the lesson plan and trying to label what was already there. And what I noticed is that I didn't have identify the need really at all. And in using the phrase gradual release, I thought that I had new learning and development and application, but I realized I needed to be more intentional in what I was doing with my lesson plan. So I got out the Identify the Need development sheet, and the first thing I did was to think about the objective I'm using. My objective is that through the study of The Devil and Tom Walker, the student will be able to analyze a character to determine who he or she is and what he or she is likely to do next in the plot in order to write the rest of the story. The next thing I did was really just kind of outline my agenda. The first learning cycle that we do is based on our grammar, usage, and mechanics instruction. So that would be my first lesson cycle, and that's not really the objective that I wanted to focus on. The bulk of the learning starts here with evaluate, where students are going to complete guided notes on the 5 things. The new learning, which that's from the task I did when I labeled them. They're going to do the 5 things video and the connections where they'll take the student notes. I'm still using gradual release, and so I'm doing that model with Go Set a Watchman. I'm doing the we do with Go Set as well. And then they're going to apply the you do with Devil and Tom Walker. And I wanted them to do an exit ticket looking at who is the character and what comes next. And then that was going to be when I give them my model paragraph to help them to see about the rubric and what their personal score goal was. Next, I started thinking through my objective, and I've already really kind of outlined my major objective. So for this point, I started looking at my sub-objectives. I need the students to be able to analyze the character. I need them to analyze the plot. I need them to recognize and add to the details of setting that they've been given. And then I need them to pick up on possible conflicts or add a conflict that makes sense based on what they've had. But looking at the rubric, I need them to write the response in narrative form, and I want them to include dialogue so that they can hit in those higher areas of the scoring rubric. I didn't really include identifying the need before, so I really needed to think through the question. Obviously, the students are taking the test on Tuesday, and it's the TN Ready standards, and I really kind of want to help prepare them for that future, but outside of that, I think our students are kind of tired of having this test that we really don't know a lot about shoved in their faces. So I really want to kind of get back to reading for fun, that students need to analyze the characters to be able to connect to what is realistic in the story and to make the audience want to partake in the text. I think that's going to help them with writing the narrative, and they may want to include some of these details in other writings throughout life. Also, I want them to understand that if they can connect to Foster, they're going to understand the text and they're going to connect with it better, and they might actually enjoy it when they can start to see the intertextuality and the complexity of the plot. So just to kind of step out here for a second, one thing that I really wanted to draw attention to is the intentional focus on my sub-objectives. I had my objective for the lesson, but I also thought through the sub-objectives because I wanted to help the students to determine why they need to learn it. The next thing I did is, we can't avoid the fact that we have these standards that we have to teach. This isn't something we get to just make up. But I have like a little hidden agenda that I want my students to be able to enjoy reading. And so what I really want to get students to see is many of them want creative writing. They keep asking for creative writing. When are we going to get to write about what we want to write about? And so I can sort of build that into class, and I can make that connection with this task and this set of skills because it's going to help them with the narrative writing that they may want to include in their other details. So how can I communicate that to the students? I think for me, I teach with my PowerPoint a lot, and so I can build that into the lesson. I can build in a slide for that. I already have them doing the guided notes because I wanted to see to it that they remembered all of those details about plot that were so important, but I also wanted them to connect what they already know to the Foster literary principles for analysis. So I'm going to use the guided note to create a need for the specific skills. I think I'm going to do that through a thinking question to connect Foster to the task on the test. And then when the students aren't successful, I'm going to ask them what they need to be able to do to meet the objective. So I need to build in a little bit of a discussion based on that question that's going to be related to the topic. And then I'm going to get them to say, I'm going to get them to give the need statement. Like I want them to identify, I need this because, and then put their own meaning in there. And that might help with just motivation within that lesson as well, because this could be a rather boring topic for a lot of people. So I think I'm going to start with an assessment question. What are the basic story elements, and how does Foster help connect to the writing of a narrative? And then from there, I'm going to use the discussion to pull out why students need to learn this. So sort of stepping out of this whole process and what we've done, I already changed my agenda when we did that first task of intentionally thinking through how we were going to evaluate the learning. With my guiding questions, I really brought out my sub-objectives and used them to help me identify not just the standard test answer, but why else might the students want to work on that. And then I really thought about how to communicate it. And when I went through this process, I noticed my agenda changed a little more as well. So what you can see here is that once I really went through and focused on not only evaluate, but on identifying the learning, I have changed my agenda for the better. I'm evaluating the students through that completed guided notes on the 5 things. I built in a review video if needed because I realized when I did that task, the students might not have all that information. For the identifying the need, I'm going to do a quick question discussion. And then their new learning is going to be connecting Foster to the 5 things with the student notes. I still have the gradual release where we're annotating for character and those other elements, but the new learning is that model with Go Set a Watchman. They're going to develop the we do with Go Set a Watchman. They're going to apply it in the you do with the Devil and Tom Walker. Their new learning is that they are going to read and annotate the section of the text, and then I want them to have some application that is ongoing. They're going to add to the setting, and they're going to add to character as well. In the end, I need to evaluate this section of learning. They're not finished. They haven't written the ending of the story. That's in the next lesson. But I still want to evaluate something so that I know that today's lesson was successful. So I'm going to build in an exit ticket. But then I also want to revisit the quick question, and I want to see if now they can connect Foster and identify ways in which this information will be beneficial to them outside of this class and outside of this task.